Hello and welcome back to Raise Gaming and more Path of Exile 2 talk. Today I'm back to talk about this early access version and some of the issues that it's facing right now. Now I first made a feedback style review after I completed the campaign the second time, on Cruel, and was really just starting the endgame. Now we're a bit deeper in, we faced the pinnacle bosses and all the content bar, say the burning monolith boss, and now we're starting with some ults, that kind of point. What are the issues we're seeing? Now we've got a little deeper. That's what I want to talk about. The awkward part about making a video of this nature though is how negative it's just going to come off, since we're talking about issues of the game and why. It's important for me to say then at the start is that I think PoE 2 is insanely good even in this first version. I knew I'd enjoy this game and I knew I'd play a lot, but it's been much more so than I imagined. I've basically played it constantly since the early access launch. Overall, this package is extremely good, so even in this first state where there absolutely are issues, I'd still strongly recommend it. So with that relevant disclaimer said, let's get into it. Beginning with a major topic that is mitigation and how insanely unbalanced this is when we're thinking about max life and armor compared to evasion, and then even more so energy shield. Armor stacking is pretty difficult and hardly worth it compared to other mitigation stacking. Armor becomes more and more potent the more you commit to it. 1,000 armor isn't really going to do anything for anyone. 10,000 armor is going to be a lot more relevant. 20,000, it'll actually be very strong. But to get 20k armor, good luck. And the result is ultimately one of the worst mitigation options that you can have. This can be compared to actually max life stacking, which is so much harder in PoE 2. They've essentially all but removed max life nodes from the skill tree, the passive skill tree, where before in PoE 1, you'd have to go through a lot of them as a main priority. This by comparison is a lot more freeing, but without them, what's the alternative? But there doesn't seem to be a relevant replacement for that. So we're just struggling to get max life, mostly getting it through our gear and affixes on them, making it an incredibly valuable thing. But with the limited amount that you can actually get, say percent life increases from gems and jewels, they're less impactful because you have a smaller pool to actually increase by percent. So between armor and health, you've got kind of the worst options when it comes to survivability and mitigation. Now let's imagine you're playing a warrior or anyone that's around the strength area. Everything around there is pretty much tied to armor, and we don't have as many or barely any health increase options there too. So you just end up in the worst place on the tree. Meanwhile, you have evasion, which, you can stack really quite easily to 10 to 20k by properly committing to it in the end game. There's lots of great options for evasion on the skill tree, even with other perks that works great, like movement speed or double your evasion if you've just rolled. And the problem with evasion is if you're not actually committing to acrobatics, the keystone. Evasion's only going to dodge certain damage types, and of course, even if you have really high evasion, there's that percent chance that the attack hits you and you just die anyway. So just evasion on its own is probably not the best idea. Fortunately, evasion and energy shield, they stack really well together. Generally where they are in the tree, you can get a bit of both very well. So while evasion's easier to garner, it's not as reliable as energy shield, which is incredibly easy to stack up, and then you just get this buffer of thousands of health essentially before your real health even ever gets hit. If you also have evasion behind that, you might not take the hit, and then it recharges pretty quick, especially with certain aura setups. So your reward for investing in it is very high. Actually achieving it is very easy, and it's significantly more effective than armor, that's for damn sure. It's created what I believe has become relatively meta of either just committing to energy shield and mana, which is very easy, or if you're not just like a straight intelligence class, going evasion and energy shield together. So if you're, say, a ranger or even a mercenary, that's going to be an incredibly good option. Meanwhile, if you're, say, a warrior on the other side of the skill tree, you have a hard time getting over to the best place. So I think mitigation as a whole needs to kind of rebalance. I think you should have an easier time getting max life. I think armor should be much more effective, or they should make it easier to get bigger numbers thanks to the skill tree. Should they nerf energy shield and evasion? I don't think so. Maybe they could tone back energy shield a bit because I think it's stronger than evasion, but if they did that, they need to make the other options significantly better. However way they choose to balance it, I'm not too fazed. Another topic of balancing though, it's a pretty big one, so I won't go on about this too long. I think we all know about it. Items that increase the rarity percent drop chance, disgustingly meta. So Every damn piece of gear that you're wearing should have it on it, and you want it as big number as possible. This may take priority for you over actually having a functional item, say with enough resistances or whatever other perks, damage increasing options, ultimately encouraging the player not to make the strongest setup and then challenge the hardest content, but instead challenge mid to easier content with really high rarity percent increases, and then just farm that out very successfully and get often better currency drops or even relevant drops than the hardest stuff. That is obviously terrible, and it's a massive topic of interest in the community right now because of that. To me, this is an obvious issue, and I think everyone knows about it by now. So yeah, I don't want to talk about it too much, but yes, rarity, increasing the rarity drop chances, it's a massive issue. How should they fix this? There's probably a lot of different options. Lowering the relevance of that affix, but raising the baseline drop rates is probably an easy way to address this. Another way is to make the harder content that people aren't doing so much of because they're running rarity instead, make that significantly more valuable to contest that. Having an important balance of being able to farm easier content with the right setup is a good thing, but making the harder stuff actually competitive in terms of reward is going to be vital as well. But once again, I think it's an issue of rebalancing, so yeah, easily doable. Here's another thing that really bothers me, and I think a lot of us can agree with this. What the hell just killed me? Many enemies will die and then blow up. Or, right, they'll throw like a little telegraph attack, such as those explosive dynamite throws. Ultimately, we're talking about things that are really subtle, that are essentially going to one-shot you most of the time. In my opinion, there's only like one good death telegraph that's very obvious, and if you get hit by it, it's kind of on you. And it's those big dudes with the clubs that when you kill them, they sort of swell up and turn red, and then they're very clearly about to explode, and then they do so. Some of them have similar explosion style deaths, but with much subtler animations, and also happen way quicker, it feels like. Basically, there's a lot of poorly or lack of telegraphed attacks that occur on enemy death, or just like really casual attacks from enemies that come out at you that will one-shot you that aren't obvious enough. It's just not clear enough. All of this results in me kind of sidestepping in all combat to avoid this from happening to me, but also when I kill an enemy, I never ever walk on their body. Not until a few seconds have passed. If something drops, I circle around it for a while until eventually I think it's safe enough to go in. And even then, I'm kind of scared to loot. On top of that, there's a few vision obscurity type effects. Say when you're doing a strongbox, not only is that event super slow and basically a waste of time, they promised to fix that after a reveal live stream, but it feels like they haven't. But also, they generate these black clouds that means you can't even see yourself at times, or say the attacks that are going to kill you. Another example of that would be delirium, which I think is a great activity, but it does create this kind of white cloud, this smog effect that is a lesser version of that black cloud, but a similar issue. If I can't see the enemy or my character or what they're doing, and then they can do something that will one-shot me, whether that's a death effect or just an attack they're doing, it's incredibly frustrating and something I don't think should be in this game. So for now, I think they should tone back any vision obscuring things, especially the delirium kind of effect, the vision on your screen. It's just not fun to engage with for a long time. But also, there's special enemies and rares with scary effects. But there's also a surprising amount of normal enemies with insane spells or attacks, like I was saying with the dynamite throwers. But what about like a group of ranged enemies off screen? When you got that waystone affix that gives them extra projectiles, that can be off screen death that you just never even saw coming. I've seen a lot of requests in that regard then for a way to zoom further out from a character, which could address that issue, I suppose. But it's not just nasty rangers. Special casts like that water orb that can drown you, that comes from a regular enemy and it's meant to be like a really potent spell. So I think challenge is great and making the experience tense works well in this game, but it comes in a setup that's pretty brutal. Which is where we're going to talk about the over-punishing nature of endgame mapping. It's become something very tense and very focused, and something that I really can't chill and just kind of map with. Even when I'm really over-leveled for where I am, whether I'm really geared or putting out great output, got all my defensive set up, like we spoke about just now with the death telegraphs, there's a number of affix combos on a rare that can be incredibly dangerous, kind of, yeah, you're gonna die, pal. Like say a tangibility affix where you have to go near it, otherwise you can't hurt it. And then say that rare has an AoE or radius affix that destroys you when you go near it. Imagine you have two rares on top of each other doing that. Not to mention it's really hard to even see what rares have as their affixes because you have to hover over them and they move around a lot. And while you're trying to evade their stuff, it's hard to do that. It's just not visually clear enough, which is again another big issue. And when you die, you lose a lot of XP, especially when you're towards the 90s. Losing, say, 10-15% XP is brutal. Imagine you die twice back to back. But not only that, you now have lost the entire map. Like something maybe that you juiced up really hard, a tier 15 or higher. Maybe it had like different activities and a boss. It's all gone now. So that intense punishment means you're very tense and focused the entire time. And that's why you can expect to suddenly die RNG almost. So everything you do carries a huge risk, which is interesting, but it's very taxing long term. Remember, they implemented a checkpoint system during the campaign. I know they want to keep the difficulty intenseness there, but I don't know, something to do with the checkpoints or limited respawns or something. It could go a long way. But here's another really big topic with the endgame and mapping and such. It's where the league mechanics are kind of behind the pinnacle boss kills. It is really grindy to achieve even one attempt of most of the pinnacle boss fights. You have to grind a resource, say like 300 of it, until you get one single go. So you better not mess it up. So because of that, you won't attempt it until you really over level and really over gear it, encouraging you to avoid one of the best parts of the game. The boss fights and the best ones of those kind. But you know, when you kill it, you'll get those 2 points, forcing you to make it harder next time but more rewarding, sure. But then you get new options that make the league activity itself way better to engage with. Like Breach, you might find more breaches in one run, resulting in more shards to build that 300 again faster. It might make that activity actually valuable, like actually worth running. So I think at least some of these points shouldn't be behind the boss kill. Maybe the first 2 or even 4 should come from doing the activity and achieving something within it. The pinnacle boss fight should reward something beyond loot for the activity, no doubt, but being the only source of the points, I think is too restrictive, and again, encourages you not to risk it, so you don't do it until you're well and truly ready. All the activities are hardly worth much compared to when you have the points after, where they're extremely worth it by comparison. So again, it's another issue of poor balancing in my opinion, but again, something I think they can easily address, which is good. Also on that topic, I feel Ritual and Delirium have a lot of issues with the mobs pressing into you. Say in Ritual, where you're in a tight area, maybe you're in a corridor, maybe there's death waves, you can barely move around, and the mobs, they box you in like instantly. So I appreciate that they want to keep the boxing you in risk as part of the gameplay, but if they've designed an activity that's going to force it, it feels almost unavoidable in certain environments. It's no good. Delirium, on the other hand, has mobs that spawn from those little windows during the event. They rush out in a kind of set path forward. I always feel myself being pushed and dragged around by those way too often. And that can lead to a burst of damage that, if you're unlucky, could just be a BS death. So I think mechanical changes to the way that these things can spawn on the map and how they push you around, get you trapped, that'd be nice. Next, a quick word on currency, trading, and the economy. It's pretty bad. There was this weird turning point where you could no longer buy relevant items for exalts anymore, but instead it was all divines and quite a lot of them. I believe the value of one divine is like 70 to 80 exalts right now. So to purchase a reasonably good item, you might be expecting to pay 3 to 5 divines, which is ridiculous when they're pretty rare. At this point, everyone is posting even slightly reasonable items for one divine. So you're looking at a wall of pretty meh items for a divine currency. This is insane. If you want something real, you're expecting to pay 2 minimum. So yes, it's become very ridiculous very quick, and I'm actually not sure what to suggest to fix it, because it's the players setting these numbers, right? Not the devs. So do they make valuable currency like exalts and divines more common, or will that make the issue even worse? What do you guys think? Now, also still an issue at this point that I'm going to mention, but I did talk about before, so I'll be quick. Firstly, it's melee. Being a true melee class is a bad idea in the early game, and it's still a relevant issue late game. Obviously there you can get around it with a variety of skills that can make you more mobile, but you know, if you're using a ranged weapon like a bow, crossbow, whatever, you can attack and move at the same time. There's supports that make that even smoother. Why is it that melee has to kind of be very static during their attacks? I think melee should be fully movable while attacking. In fact, I don't think it should have even a movement penalty while it attacks. Ranged martial weapons seemingly have much better times early, and I think this results in whatever build you plan, whatever class you pick, probably going to go for a martial weapon, a ranged one, while you're leveling. Even if you started as a witch, or a warrior, or a monk, you pick up a bow until you're ready to do your real build. That isn't to say that there aren't other good options like the pillar setup that people are using, but I still think the top option is to go a ranged martial weapon, and bows in particular, because crossbows have a kind of awkward start as well. So it's very common, it's a bit of a meme right now. Oh yeah, you're picking a new character, making a new character, enjoy bow for a while. So making melee a better experience in the early game, I think, is very important. Also, the restrictive choices that they put in, I'll just reference again. You can't change your ascendancy. That kind of feels bad, but I can understand it. What I can't understand is, say, the sockets on gear, whatever you put in there, runes or otherwise, you should be able to take those out and swap them around, because element resistance is still a nightmare in this version of the game. Getting like a proper 100% element res total on one item is super valuable, but very expensive with the way the economy is right now. With the way that you might have put, say, lightning res by socketing a rune into your armor, but then you change some items around and now you don't need that. Now you need a different resistance, but you can't take that rune out and swap it. It feels terrible. So the element resistance issue is still there, still very restrictive, and I think it's made worse by the fact you can't change your runes around, which I still feel there's no good reason for that to be the system. Again though, super easy fix, right? It's just a question of how much they want to pull back on their original design plans. So overall, conclusion, I think I want to see a general rebalance patch. There's a lot of stuff that's underused or simply too weak. Armor compared to energy shield is an obvious one. Content like strong boxes being just not worth doing. Say various league mechanics being really not good to do until you upgrade them with a skill tree after killing the pinnacle boss. Actually letting us get 2 to 4 points in those trees before doing the pinnacle boss would just change the game. Specific skill gems or even spirit gems like Wind Dancer being incredible compared to other defensive options like Scavenge Plating, which provides armor and thorns temporarily. You know, another rebalancing example. I think a lot of the endgame critics are largely around these kind of number style tweaks that need to happen. Rebalancing after fair feedback. I still think they should stick to what they believe is best. If their design is one thing, they want to keep it that way, fair enough. But I want to see what they do after this first wave of endgame feedback. I want them to take it seriously. Again though, as I said at the start, the game's incredible, even in this state. Every aspect of it has something very compelling about it. And so my opinion of PoE 2 remains extremely positive. It's just, yeah, I do think it needs now a proper rebalancing patch based on feedback. I'm happy to wait a little bit longer, but I do think they need to say something that they're planning on doing to address some of these bigger issues that are being discussed right now. Let us know what you think though. Is there anything big that I missed to talk about today? For now though, I've been Hollow, you've been you, thanks for watching.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.